We don't have enough, Harold. I'm so sorry. The elderly woman's voice trembled across the worn vinyl booth, her arthritic fingers clutching a faded coin purse as though it contained all the hope left in the world. Her husband, a man whose weathered face told stories of decades spent under open skies, reached across the table with shaking hands to cover hers. "It's all right, Constance," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion and something that sounded like defeat. We'll figure something out. We always do." Nora Whitfield paused mid-step, the coffee pot in her hand suddenly feeling impossibly heavy. She'd been waitressing at Maplewood Diner for 6 years, ever since her father's sudden death from a heart attack had left her and her mother drowning in medical debt and mortgage payments. She'd learned to recognize desperation in all its forms. She saw it every day in the mirror. But there was something about this couple that pierced through her usual emotional armor, the way they sat close together, their shoulders touching as though drawing strength from proximity, the dignity with which they counted their coins, trying to make $7.38 cover a $12 meal, the love evident in every glance, every gentle touch. Nora approached their table slowly, setting the coffee pot down. "Is everything okay?" Harold looked up, his blue eyes, faded but kind, meeting hers with embarrassment. "Miss, we thought we had more cash with us. We can leave our information, come back tomorrow with the rest. Or we could just have coffee," Constance added quickly, pushing the 2 plates away, even though Nora could see she'd barely touched her soup. "We're not that hungry anyway." The lie was gentle, but Nora saw through it. She saw the careful way Constance had been savoring each spoonful, making it last. She saw Harold's untouched sandwich, the kind of meal someone saves when they're not sure where the next one is coming from. "You know what?" Nora said softly, pulling out her order pad and making a show of checking something. "I think I made a mistake on your ticket. This meal was supposed to be part of our senior special today, completely covered." Harold frowned slightly. "But we didn't see any special on the menu." "It's new. Manager just told me about it." The lie came easily, born from kindness rather than deception. "Please, enjoy your meal, both of you." Constance's eyes filled with tears. She reached out, grasping Nora's wrist with surprising strength. "You're lying, aren't you? You sweet, foolish girl. You're paying for this yourself." Nora felt her own throat tighten. "Maybe, but you remind me of my parents. My dad, before he passed, he and my mom used to come here every Sunday. Same booth you're sitting in, actually. She still comes sometimes, orders his favorite pie, sits here alone just to feel close to him." I paused, surprised by her own honesty. "Let me do this, please. It matters to me." Harold's weathered hand covered both theirs. "What's your name, young lady?" Nora Wakefield." "Nora," Constance repeated, as though committing it to memory. "You have no idea what this means, what you've done for us today." But Nora did have some idea, because 24 years old and drowning in debt that never seemed to shrink, no matter how many double shifts she worked, she understood what it meant when someone saw you, truly saw you, and chose kindness. She paid their $12 bill from her own tips, money she'd earmarked for the electric company. She'd figure it out later. She always did. Harold and Constance stayed for another hour, nursing their coffee and talking quietly. When they finally stood to leave, both moving with the careful slowness of advanced age, Constance hugged Nora tightly. "You're an angel," she whispered. "Don't ever let the world convince you otherwise." That night, Nora mentioned the couple to her mother, Geneva, as they sat in their small kitchen going through bills. Geneva was a fragile woman now, hollowed out by grief and chronic illness, but she smiled when Nora described the elderly pair. "You did a good thing, honey. Your father would be proud." We can't really afford good things right now, Mom. I looked at the stack of past due notices, but I just couldn't let them go hungry. That's because you have his heart, Geneva said quietly, touching the cross necklace she still wore, the one Nora's father had given her 30 years ago. Kindness doesn't ask if we can afford it, it just asks if we're willing. 2 days later, a knock came at their door. Nora, exhausted from a double shift, almost didn't answer, but something made her open it. A man in an expensive suit stood on their sagging porch, looking decidedly out of place in their struggling neighborhood. "Miss Nora Whitfield?" "Yes. I'm Thomas Brennan, attorney for Harold and Constance Merritt. May I come in?" Nora's heart seized with worry. "Are they okay? Did something happen?" "They're fine. Better than fine, actually. But I need to discuss something important with you." In their living room, with its second-hand furniture and walls that needed painting, Thomas Brennan opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Geneva appeared in the doorway, leaning on her walker, confusion evident on her face.
"Miss Whitfield, 2 days ago you paid for a meal for Mr. and Mrs. Merritt at Maplewood Diner. Is that correct?" Yes. It was just $12. It wasn't—" "It was everything," Thomas interrupted gently. "You see, Harold and Constance have been married for 62 years. They owned a farm about 40 miles from here, 170 acres that's been in Harold's family for 4 generations. Nora sat down slowly, not understanding where this was going. 6 months ago, Harold had a stroke. The medical bills, combined with the cost of keeping the farm running, depleted their savings. They've been selling off equipment, livestock, everything they could. That day you saw them was the day they'd received notice that the bank was foreclosing. They'd driven into town to meet with an attorney, me, but the meeting went longer than expected. They'd spent their last cash on gas to get home." Geneva's hand flew to her mouth. Nora felt tears burning her eyes. "That meal you bought them," Thomas continued, his professional demeanor softening, "was the first kindness they'd experienced in months of losing everything. When they got home that night, Constance told Harold that if there was still goodness like yours in the world, maybe things weren't as hopeless as they seemed." "I don't understand," Nora whispered. "Why are you telling me this?" Thomas pulled out a document. "Because yesterday, Harold and Constance made a decision. They'd been approached by a developer who wanted their land for a strip mall. The offer would cover their debts and give them enough to live comfortably in a retirement community. They were going to accept." That's good, isn't it? They deserve to be comfortable." "They changed their minds because of you." Thomas slid the document across the coffee table. "This is a deed transfer. Harold and Constance are giving you their farm." The words didn't make sense. Nora stared at the paper, her vision blurring. No, they can't. I bought them soup and a sandwich. You can't give someone a farm for $12. "They're not giving it to you for $12, Thomas said gently. "They're giving it to you because you reminded them why they fought so hard to keep it in the first place. Because you showed them that there are still people who care about strangers, who choose kindness over self-interest. Because Constance researched you, learned about your father's death, your mother's illness, your debt, and they decided that their legacy should go to someone who would honor what that land represents: family, sacrifice, compassion." Geneva was crying now, leaning heavily on her walker. Nora couldn't breathe. "There are conditions," Thomas continued. "You must keep the farmhouse maintained. You must visit them monthly. They're moving to Willowbrook Senior Living, 20 minutes from the property. And you must promise that if you ever sell the land, it won't be to developers. It stays agricultural or becomes a park or something that serves the community." I don't know anything about running a farm," Nora said, her voice breaking.
The land is currently leased to a neighboring farmer who's been growing organic vegetables. That lease continues, providing you with steady income. There's also a tenant cottage on the property that's been rented out, providing additional monthly revenue. Combined, it's enough to cover property taxes, your mother's medications, and then some. The farmhouse itself needs work, but it's structurally sound, habitable. Nora looked at her mother, who was openly sobbing now. "Mom, your father and we always dreamed of having land, a garden, a place where we weren't scraping by every month." Mom's voice shook with emotion. "We never thought, oh, sweetheart, this is a miracle." "Harold and Constance don't believe in miracles," Thomas said quietly. "They believe in kindness returned. They believe that $12 you couldn't afford to spend deserves 170 acres they can't bear to see destroyed. They asked me to tell you something specific." He pulled out a handwritten note, Constance's shaky cursive filling the page. "Dear Nora, we are old. We have no children to leave our legacy to, no family who cares about what this land meant to us. But we have you, a stranger who saw us in our worst moment and chose gentleness. That is the rarest crop we've ever known. Let this land give you what you gave us: hope, security, the ability to help others. Live there with your mother, build a life, and when you sit on that porch watching the sunset, know that you earned this not with money, but with the kind of wealth that really matters. All our love, Harold and Constance." The room was silent, except for the sound of two women crying. Nora met with Harold and Constance the following week at Willowbrook. The facility was modest but clean, filled with residents playing cards and tending small garden boxes. Constance met her in the lobby, moving slowly with her cane, her face lighting up when she saw Nora. "You came," she breathed, pulling Nora into a fierce hug. "I can't accept this," Nora said, even as she held the older woman close. "It's too much. It's your entire life." "Exactly," Harold said, approaching them carefully with steps. "It's our life, and we want it to mean something. With you, it will."
They sat in a community garden, surrounded by roses and tomato plants, and talked for 3 hours. Harold told stories about growing up on the farm, about his parents teaching him that land wasn't property, it was responsibility. Constance showed Nora pictures, the farmhouse in its glory days, the barn where they'd held community dances, the fields that had fed families during hard times. "We never had children," Constance said softly. "That was our great sorrow. But now it feels like we do, like we're giving our child the inheritance we always wanted to leave." "Why me?" Nora asked, tears streaming down her face. "Really, why?" Harold reached across the small patio table, taking her hand in his calloused one. "Because when you had almost nothing, you gave anyway. Because you looked at two strangers and saw your parents. Because kindness like yours is the only thing worth inheriting in this world." 3 months later, Nora and Geneva moved into the farmhouse. It was overwhelming at first, the space, the quiet, the sheer impossibility of their changed circumstances. But slowly they made it home. Geneva's health improved with less stress and better access to medication. Nora reduced her hours at the diner, using the farm income to enroll in community college classes. Every Sunday, they drove to Willowbrook to have lunch with Harold and Constance. The four of them became family in the truest sense, not bound by blood, but by the choice to care for one another. One Sunday, a year after that fateful day at the diner, they sat together in the farmhouse kitchen, the same kitchen where Harold had grown up, where his mother had canned vegetables and his father had taught him to read. "I've been thinking," Nora said quietly, looking around at these 3 people who'd become her anchors, "about what to do with the old barn. It's huge, and we're not using it for anything except storage." "What did you have in mind?" Harold asked, his eyes twinkling with curiosity. A community kitchen, a place where people struggling to make ends meet can come once a week for a free meal. No questions asked, no judgment, just kindness. Constance's hand trembled as she reached for Nora's. "Oh, sweetheart, that's perfect. I want to call it Harold and Constance's Kitchen because you taught me that the smallest acts of generosity can change everything. That $12 I spent that day gave me a home, gave my mother peace, gave me a future. Now I want to give that forward." Harold stood up slowly, walked to the window overlooking the fields he'd loved his entire life. His shoulders shook slightly. When he turned back, tears traced the deep lines of his face. "We chose right," he said hoarsely. "Constance, we chose right." "We did," she whispered, holding Nora's hand tightly. "We really did." Geneva, her health transformed by stability and hope, added softly, "My husband always said that kindness is the only investment that never loses value. You're proving him right, all of you." Nora looked around the kitchen at her unlikely family, at the couple who'd given everything to a stranger, at the mother who'd survived impossible grief, at the life they were building together from the ashes of their separate losses. "That day in the diner," Nora said, "I thought I was just buying soup and a sandwich. I had no idea I was planting a garden that would feed us all." Kindness is never wasted, never too small, never without consequence. A $12 meal became 170 acres. A moment of compassion became a legacy. A stranger's generosity became family. When we give from our poverty, whether that poverty is financial, emotional, or spiritual, we create abundance we cannot imagine. The greatest inheritances aren't measured in money or land, but in the love we choose to show, when it costs us everything to do so. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Let's spread more stories of kindness and hope together.